Hear the world calling, but son, don't you listen. They're only trying to drag you back into prison, that's right.
Welcome back to What Have You. I'm Rachel Jankovic.
I'm Becca Merkel.
We're behind the Goodwill. A late night stop to podcast.
Not that late.
Feels late.
It's like 7 something.
It feels late because we live in the far north where the sun sets early in the winterish times, and we haven't even hit daylight savings, at which time it really gets us.
And I just finished shoveling out a lot of soup at a lot of college freshmen, and I realized to myself that next week I'm going to have to fry a solid 10 pounds of chorizo if I was going to make that soup. Well, I'm not going to make it next week, but, like in a couple months when I make this soup again.
Scale it up.
It's going to have to be 10 pounds. Or 11 even. I mean, I did 9 pounds I fried of chorizo, but they killed it. Totally killed that pot of soup.
Yeah, you could also just do another extra 4 pounds of lentils in there. That would slow them down. It would slow them down between sausage bites.
There's a lot of lentils.
I was thinking with the soup night, because we have a lot of listeners, or I wouldn't say a lot, but because we have listeners who have told us that they have been inspired to also do soup nights, that I feel like we need to create either a page for sharing soup night menus and tips and bulk cooking ideas, or a hashtag or something so you can find it.
A hashtag is a better idea.
A hashtag so that you can link up your recipes and tell us what you made and share the deets.
Well, if we remember ever again that we said this, we'll post it somewhere.
Well, I did. Last week I made the thing that's sort of I do something wrong about it that keeps it from being a Jankovic family classic, but I don't know what that thing is that I do that's wrong, because it's just chicken noodle soup, but it was a chicken soup from, that the methodology harkens back into the family in the way that someone did it, with the little drop noodles that are called something that I have no idea how you say what they're called. I think it's like kadidalna or something. It's funny little, it's like an egg and flour little noodle dumpling thing.
I'll just say that method has never worked for me to be a magical substance at the end. But
I actually make the soup without that more often and then serve it on mashed potatoes. Now, if you make...
I do that, but I just put noodles in it and then still put it over mashed potatoes.
Yeah, but I don't ever put a noodle that's not that kind in it, is what I'm saying.
Oh,
I don't do other noodles. Whatever the case, it's a good chicken noodle soup. And then I serve it over mashed potatoes, which is, I think, comes from someone, but I do something wrong. There was a version where they didn't put carrots in it or something, and they put it on. I don't know. However, it is a gesture at a family recipe that I married into. So it's very good, but that's what I made last week. And then we ran out of it, which was, it was like the 1 week at parish group that everyone came to the one time when I felt like I was not clear that I had enough food at this party. And so as people are coming in, you're like, oh man, how much is left in the bottom of the Dutch oven for this person? And then, but it worked out. Nobody really cares.
Nobody wrote letters of complaint.
No, nobody minds. They're all nice people
ready
after
to
all.
roll with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's
true. And then tomorrow I'm making red beans and rice.
Oh.
Which is not a soup.
No.
But I just felt I would do that instead tomorrow.
Yeah.
Because why not? And guys, big news. I have been using the new, to me, not new to anyone else probably, French slap and fold technique with my sourdough dough. And it is blessing my heart.
You're going to need to post your video of it.
Yeah, it's
Did you
really...
already?
No. But it's so satisfying because the tartine...
It looks therapeutic, guys. I've not tried it, but I've seen Rachel's video. It looks like a good
therapeutic French slap and fold bread technique. But it's like a way to knead dough that's too wet to knead without adding more flour. And the sourdough that I make is the tartine recipe is 75% hydration. So it is wet. It's wet. So you want to develop the gluten without adding a lot of flour and making it tough. So anyways, this technique is really blessing my socks off. So whether or not it really does great things for the end result of the bread, I don't even care because I like doing it so much. There's something really therapeutic that goes on in that activity. Yeah. So, yeah. Anyways, we'll be doing that.
We should talk about something, Rach.
Nothing. We got nothing.
I'm starting to space off. I feel like
maybe if we get too tired to podcast, maybe we can just watch Benji.
What?
I think Benji might be in the DVD of my car.
What?
We have a DVD.
Benji is about the weirdest thing you could have pulled out.
I loved Benji as a child.
I remember that about
Loved
you.
it. Loved
I
Benji.
never was really taken with Benji. I'm still not.
The thing that kills me about it is that somehow we came upon the DVD of Benji and turned it on in the car. And we don't usually use the DVD in the car. We generally just don't have anything to do with it. So the only DVD that's been in this car is Benji, and it's been in there for like a lifetime. And it's so funny because I haven't seen it since I was a child. I've only listened to it, and
funny.
It's jazzy music, and it's pretty funny.
That's really funny.
It's like Benji running through the field somewhere to some amazing 80s music. It's pretty good. It's well worth a listen just in the soundtrack.
I feel like the 80s soundtracks, probably
You're thinking Lady Hawk.
I am thinking specifically of Lady Hawk.
Lady Hawk was a done.
Is it time for us to just give a tip and wrap it up? Because if so, Lady Hawk would be my tip. It's amazingly funny.
Lady Hawk is it's a worthwhile.
Well, it's so epic when you watch it now with not an 80s sensibility. It's amazing. The music is incredible.
It's like someone galloping on a horse through the tundra
it's like a sweeping medieval sort of an epic.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
with
it's so
a
good.
Synthesizer.
And it's so good.
And those synthesizer drums happening in the back.
But at the time in our childhood, it was amazing.
It was incredible.
We keep our kids' consumption so low on actually currently cool things that our kids, I think, still think it's pretty great.
Yeah,
not ironically. I don't think that they feel ironic about it.
They just haven't noticed that synthesizers aren't.
Well, the older kids, I'm sure, have noticed, but it's not like they're watching. It's not like. Anyways. Funny. Okay, Becca, we had some questions, and like a good podcaster, I made a list on my phone so that when I told people we'll talk about it, that I felt more confident that that I would remember. But 2 questions that came in that were very, very hand in hand, I felt,
all right,
and seasonally applicable, was what do you think of Harry Potter and having your kids read Harry Potter? Well, how into Harry Potter are we? And then B, what do we do about Halloween? And those 2 things are actually pretty close. I mean, it's topically related.
They're related.
So one thing about Harry Potter that was, I think, in the question was kind of that many people who reject Harry Potter also reject Narnia.
Yeah.
As like any kind of fantasy or Nate's books. Right. They would reject all of that. Mm-hmm. That would be the people who's just anti-fantasy in general. But I feel like it's important for me to say that I have not read the Harry Potter books.
I think it's important for me to say I read one when it first came out. I think Ben and I read it together like ages ago, really a long time ago. It was probably not when it first came out. It was probably when she was on book 3 or something. Yeah. And so we read it, and I wasn't in any way swept up in it. It was just sort of like, And then we watched some of the movies, and I think we made it to movie 3 or 4.
I dislike the movies.
And so the thing is when I see people who freak out about Harry Potter, I'm not on board with those people because I think they're being simplistic. But then when I see people who
are all in,
can't imagine what anyone could ever find to object to in Harry Potter, I think they're also being simplistic. And I think that there's Lewis and Tolkien's theory, it's not, what would you call it? Their position, I guess, on magic is actually really quite profound, and I think that it is basically describes the difference between Narnia and Harry Potter. Mm-hmm. And I think that if you're just rejecting everything because there's magic in it, as Nate is so fond of pointing out, our brother who writes fantasy,
with magic
the
in
Bible
it.
has magic in it.
Yeah,
you have,
and loads of it. It's not like just occasional.
No, and we sometimes wave a different word at it and think that solves the problem.
Well, actually, we just now
we say
read
miracles. It's a miracle.
Well, there's miracles.
We feel better about that.
There's miracles, but then there's also stuff that's genuinely part of the world that God made. And it's not like we just have been reading Leviticus and that whole woman accused of adultery, needing to drink they write the accusations and then the dust from the floor, and then they write the accusation on a tablet and sweep that off into it, and then she drinks the bitter water, and if she's guilty, her thigh will rot and her belly will swell. And if she isn't guilty, she can still conceive children. And her thigh will not rot.
I noticed it says she will conceive children.
Yeah, it said actually she will be vindicated. No, it seemed like if she was falsely accused, she will be vindicated or something.
But if you've ever heard our brother talk, I'm sure you've heard him use this example. But the premier wizard duel, the first wizard duel in literature, really, it's like Moses taking on the sorcerers of Egypt.
And they all, I love that moment. I love that they give up and throw in the towel over the gnats.
Yeah, they can't do
the gnats, they're like, we cannot. It must be his God is greater than us.
They can't do exoskeletons. It's like they did the staff to a snake.
They do water into blood.
And they don't pretend to. That's the thing. When you
the Prince of Egypt has them tricky, right?
They're pretending to do it.
No, but it doesn't say that. Their staffs turned into snakes. And
the thing is that they were clearly on the evil team. They were doing bad sorcery. Mm-hmm. But it's but you have Moses, who is throwing his staff on the ground and it's turning into a snake, and we say, oh, but it's a miracle, you see. And then what they're doing over there is sorcery, and it's wrong, and that's actually entirely true. But what Lewis and Tolkien said is that it's a question of authority. It's, do you have the authority to do the thing you're doing? And of course, when the apostles or when Christ would heal people, or when the prophets would raise someone from the dead, or whatever it is, they had the authority to do it. They were not manipulating nature, and so what Lewis and Tolkien
weren't trying to steal a power from something.
Right. They weren't cheating,
which is why man has the authority to work in medicine and trying to heal wounds. But man does not have the authority to be trying to create life or create eternal life or get into all of those super terrible tastic science experiments that are happening around whatever gross thing they're doing with stem cells and aborted babies and all of this stuff. That's an area that man has no authority to be doing that. That is dark. That is a dark practice instead of...
And I think we instinctively know the difference, because we do use the word miracle to describe a person who has been given the authority by God to do the thing they're doing. And they're not accomplishing it by means of incantations and special brouhahas that they did at the dead of the night with a dead crow and stuff. Yeah. That is the sort of sorcery that is condemned in Scripture, and it is genuinely condemned in Scripture, and it was punishable by death.
It's condemned so hard that it's have nothing to do with any person who is in, because it was also in Leviticus. It was probably in the 20-ish, somewhere in there, about the person who's trying to consult with mediums and doing, like, if there's any kind of someone trying to do that, it's not a little bit condemned. It's not
it's all
it's
the
not
way.
like be careful. It's like have nothing to do with this person and cast them out totally.
But I do think that we do instinctively know the difference, and so what we do is we say, well, these are miracles and that's magic, and the magic is bad and the miracles are good. But you have to see that in some instances it's the exact same thing. Like when Moses turns his staff to a snake and they turn their staffs to a snake.
Moses was right and they were wrong.
Yes, because he had the authority from God to do it. And so Lewis and Tolkien both preserve the distinction in their work, but they lump it all under the heading of there's good magic and then there's the dark magic, right? There's the bad magic. And Harry Potter appears...
One instance of that would be in The Magician's Nephew, when Diggory has to go get the apple.
Yeah.
And there's that whole thing about not climbing the wall.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like, where it's the tree of life, basically, but it is like you have to go through the gate. Isn't that what it is? And the witch is the one who climbed the wall.
Yeah.
And there is this like a tremendous gift can be given to you if you're obedient, but if you're not obedient, then you're trying to seize something that doesn't belong to you. It's stolen.
Yeah. But the person who's doing little incantations and things in Narnia is the bad witch. It's not Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy are not mixing up brews and casting spells with wands.
No, but Lucy has like her little potion. She has a cordial.
And then you have the Ramandu and stuff.
But even Lucy's cordial was not. She wasn't making it. She was given it. It was a thing that she was given.
Right. So basically, that distinction is preserved in Lewis,
and I want to say that it's not just preserved in Lewis; it's taught in Lewis. He goes the distance of making your kids understand that more by having been reading these things. He's not blurring lines.
Yes, and when in Prince Caspian. Is it Knickerbock who wants to bring in all of the hags?
Yeah,
and
it's like
werewolves?
whoever is fighting against.
He wants to bring them in, and it's sort of like absolutely not. That's clearly over the line. And in Tolkien, I think it's probably a far more precise, but also you have to read a lot more to understand what he's doing there, because you of course have Gandalf, who seems like right on the surface, well, he's a wizard and he has a wand and he does stuff. But I think if you delve into Tolkien, which I have never stuck it through the Silmarillion, but some people have, and they've told me these things, and that if you go through all of Tolkien's stuff, Gandalf is an angel, right? Isn't that the thing? And so he still has the authority question hammered out, whereas like even in Tolkien, the manipulation of nature and everything is the wrong kind of sorcery, the evil kind of sorcery. And so for both Tolkien and Lewis, they had a very specific and through
not just that, but they also had a personal understanding of it and God. Like, so they were not. They had a clear thought process,
and they knew what they were doing, and they actually did it very intentionally and thoughtfully. Now, okay, maybe you disagree with them, whatever, but they weren't just writing stories and inventing whatever the heck.
Right.
They believed that,
and I think it's okay
fiction,
for us to say, Nate has said, like, since our brother actually has written fantasy, which if your kids have, we love it. Like, we love this. And I often say I think I would be a big fan even if I wasn't related to him. So,
I totally would.
I'm like, it's not like we're just being weirdly fans because he's our brother. They're great. So the 100 Cupboards series, it's just excellent.
And like, once we said his name and people couldn't understand what we were saying.
Nate. Dot D. Like dot Wilson.
Nate Wilson. N-D for David. So there you go.
Yeah. So he had one of the things that he does, so there's all kinds of magic, there's all kinds of stuff happening, but the point is that the story be true on a fundamental level, like be true to
even in fiction it still has to be true.
Yeah,
it has to be deeply true.
It has to be true on the fundamental lines, like the lines of loyalties and,
So I don't think you could write a story in an imaginary world where you invented all of the terrain and you gave it funny, like the sky is purple and the mountains are yellow and you just do it all, but in that imaginary world, betrayal is a positive good and adultery is a virtue.
Yeah.
It's like, no, just because you're creating an imaginary
just because
world,
you're making it up doesn't mean you're allowed to make it up.
You can't break the deep laws of this world that God embedded. You can't break those just because it's an imaginary world you made up. And I tend to think that Harry Potter is not nearly as well informed, or I don't reject it because, oh no, magic.
No.
Because I think that's simplistic, but I also don't think that she understands what she's doing.
But we know that she does. We know that she doesn't understand it on a fundamental level because that's a matter of public record. But it is also,
when Christians object to it and they say, "Look, sorcery is condemned in Scripture," they have a good point.
Yeah, because it's if you say about Narnia, sorcery is condemned in Scripture, it's like, yes, and it's also condemned in Narnia. Like,
yeah,
it is. That's the bad side there, and in Tolkien, that's true too. But the thing that is, I have not read Harry Potter. We have our oldest, I think at least, has read a couple of them, but she read them so she could discuss them with classmates and people. So we have not facilitated getting into Harry Potter in a deep way.
No, we've had kids read them, but I think that that's also important because when our kids get to be, junior high school age, it's time for us to be teaching them how to think about things.
Yeah, not like, you may not read that.
Yeah, and you can't teach them how to think about stuff if you don't ever let them think about it. And so,
right.
But it's important to guide them through it and not just turn them loose. And I really dislike, I feel like there's a sort of I don't know, is it a subgroup? It's a part of our culture, I think, dominantly women, frequently Christian, that have this idea that if it's a book, it's virtuous. If you're a bookworm, it's a virtue. If you're a reader, it's amazing. And if you love the library, you're incredible. And it's like, I would never just turn the kids loose at the library. It's like, are you joking me? The library is
just a den of evil over there.
I mean, now my kids are old enough, but I mean, when they were little, it's like,
no, it's terrible.
No way. Like, the library is not a safe place.
No.
It's full of lies and terrible stuff.
Yeah. I still remember us going to the library with Dad and having to bring our books, and he would look at them to see if we could check them out or not. Like that's going to be
And of course, we were allowed to peruse the shelves. But the kind of people who just feel like a library is a safe place to send the kids.
If my kids are hanging out at the library, then that's good. I think a thing that I want to say with Harry Potter is I'm not especially whizzed up about Harry Potter either direction. We would not let our kids become fascinated with it. They are not, like, we have not had any child care for it that much. Like, like where they're just kind of, but it's very similar to what we have done with Disney movies or whatever, where we let them watch it, but we're like, guys, this is not our people. Like, these are not the songs of our people. This is not what we're all about. You know what I mean? Like, we want you to watch it with a critical eye and not be spoon-fed, not just.
And see, and I know when Hunger Games was going around years ago, and the kids were in discussions with friends all the time about Hunger Games, and so it's like, yeah, we need to actually find out about it. So first Ben just read it, and then he had our oldest read it, and then they talked about it and talked about what's wrong with it, and here's how you can talk to your friends about it, and these are the reasons we object, and see, here's how she sucks you in as an author, and see what she does well and see what she does poorly. But see, that's the kind of thing that we try and do with our kids in movies and in books and in music, and like the school our kids are at, that's what we're trying to do in classes, is like, okay, here's a thing and it's flawed, and we can appreciate the craft, or we can look at the artistry or whatever, but we can also notice the flaws. And sometimes the flaws are bad enough that we just say, yeah, this one's
not worth it.
Not really worth, but in the end, like, well, we read it because we wanted to show you how it isn't worth it. But, you know, like, there are times when you say, yeah, the flaws outweigh the benefits. There are times when the benefits outweigh the flaws, but it's still important to note the flaws. And I think that oftentimes we want this toggle on or off switch where either it's wonderful and I will admit of no criticism to it ever, and I will get very huffy if anyone ever does.
Yeah, or just stress
it's
out.
Evil, and anyone who reads it is evil.
Right. And I don't feel that way about those things. I do remember that when we were little and Home Alone came out. And I remember Dad walking us through the concepts of Home Alone, and I think, actually, now I can't remember.
No, he didn't. I think you freewheeled this one yourself.
No. We watched it and talked about it. I know we talked about it but I was younger. It's possible you didn't need to have been talked about Home Alone, and I did. Whatever the case, I remember Dad saying in a different context, don't say it is a great movie with some bad parts. Like, if there's a part we're fast forwarding or something. And he was like, let's not call it a winner with a few, or as Dad likes to say, how many slugs do you need to find in your salad before it's not a good salad anymore? Like, if you find a major slug, would you be like, it's a totally delicious salad?
It's a pity about that slug.
Pity about the slug. And then if you start running into multiple slugs, how hard are you going to try with this salad? And, but anyways, I remember a friend, a pastor's wife, my friend's mom asked me, she said, oh, you saw Home Alone? How was it? And me busting out all my Johnny on the spotness with what I learned was like, it was a really bad movie with some good parts. Don't let me hastily recommend Home Alone to you. There may have been something in it that was not good. And there was something in it that was not good. Anyways, all that is to say, and then Halloween is another version of this, merging into Halloween.
Harry Potter, though, to just land it, is that I think we in general feel like we would not wholeheartedly endorse it. We would also not simplistically reject it, but we are also not super enthused about it.
The thing that I super minded in the movies, but of course it's been years since I saw them, so good luck with me pulling out specifics. But I felt like no one was all the way evil and no one was all the way good. Like everyone was constantly shifting. You know what I mean? Like the person who's like the villain then is actually okay. Like there was never just a clear evil and good. It was very difficult to find that. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
I know that there is some arch villain in it, I think, but the point is just that there were a lot of people and players and that were like on again, off again, good or evil, and you never really knew.
And
that's kind of difficult.
I can see why it appealed to people, because it's quite a
it's a fun, grand.
It's a fun setting, and just
a grand scale.
Random trivia: when we lived in Oxford, my husband's college was Christchurch in Oxford, and the Harry Potter dining hall from the movie was filmed in the dining hall in Christchurch, which is where it's basically just the cafeteria where he could have eaten 3 meals a day if he wanted, but he lived off site.
Since
and so
he was not a crazy Harry Potter fan, he did not.
Occasionally people would try and sneak into the college in costume. But it really was quite a fabulous place to go eat dinner. So we would go for high dinners sometimes, and we would try and take guests, and it was always really fun because it is an amazing spot and a terrific place to go have a formal dinner. And we were served boar one time and rabbit one time. Yeah, it was amazing. Fun. It was really fun, and they wear academic robes and the whole thing. So it was great, and that's my
so moving on though
Harry
to the
Potter
Halloween.
connection.
Moving on to the Halloween thing, is that we do kind of do Halloween, but
in our own way.
We do it in the way that is trick or treating for the little people who were dressed up as something like a gypsy or an astronaut. We do not do any of the ghoulish, scary, witchy.
Well, and this goes back to like when we were little. I remember Dad's description is we don't dress up as the other team.
No, we don't be them.
And the other team would be the ones Nickabrick likes.
Yeah,
the hags and the werewolves.
So from the direction of, our kids, because it's actually a total blast to take them trick-or-treating. It's really fun with the little kids. We enjoy that. But our kids are outgrowing that very quickly. But the little ones, we just do the loop with them, dressed up as cowboys, and they run and say thank you to people,
And we used to have a fall carnival that was always around Halloween that was sort of a Reformation Day. It was sort of a fall carnival.
It was just a
sort of
fall
Halloween
carnival, yeah.
And it would have a costume contest.
They did do that this year. They just did it at the end of September, and we didn't care enough about it to do that. But
they would do group costume contests, and my children, with a cousin, and this totally killed me. Ben and I were out of town. It was a few years ago, and it was pretty awesome. And they won. I think they won the prize on this one. They were a group. They were a group costume, and they went as a McDonald's French fry container. And so they made a big.
Well, they went as the fries.
Well,
in
they
the
were
container.
the yellow fries inside the container. So they all. It looked pretty good.
They were hilarious.
They nailed the French fry container. But that's the thing is we don't all dress up as
on the part where
the undead.
No, and we don't entertain ourselves with the zombies and the witches and the etc. etc. And it's mostly just because we always think, Proverbs, wisdom speaking, said those who hate me love death. Like that, whatever fascination that is not from the Lord.
It's not a healthy one.
It's not a good one. It's just not. It's like there's something weird happening there that a culture is so fascinated with Halloween. Because that's gone way... It used to be when I was a kid, only the extreme creep-tod houses would have actually had, like, a dead hand in the yard.
Yeah, it's far bigger.
And now it's gotten to be a thing that is, like, what everyone's into. I think it's just
because it's another chance to sell commercially sort of manufactured kitsch to everyone.
Luke commented, though, that he's like, oh, humans, they love liturgy. I was like, it is actually really true. It's like, it's the fall. What do we do in the fall? Like,
we get out
our gross stuff and we stick it all over the outside of the house. And my kids are always like, something is wrong with that family. Because when you drive by one there's one in town right now that has like a dog kennel or something in the yard with two like kid dolls inside of it, like kids trying to get out of a cage. You're like, why would you decor your house?
It's really gross. It's like it's a really gross side of our culture. And I do think that the more diseased our culture gets, the more the pussy sores are starting to show. And it seems like that's what we have happening with Halloween. But
anyways, that's
a chance to eat carameled apples in the fall dressed as a skunk is pretty fun.
It's great. That's what we do. Is we live the dream of running around getting candy from strangers for a little short minute, and then we wrap it up.
But we just don't do ghosts, and we don't do witches, and we don't do skeletons, and we don't do all that stuff because
I
the
have
same
to say
reason that we object to sorcery.
But totally apart from the yuckiness of Halloween, trick-or-treating is a hilariously fun cultural practice, which is like the designated night where we all buy candy to give to kids in costume is an amazing, it is a great thing. And so that side I'm like, oh no, that's that, like keep that, scrap all the other stuff, but keep that. So in that way we do celebrate Halloween. So okay, so then how
much time do we have left? What are we looking at here? Woo,
we have a few minutes.
We're kind of just hitting the collage tonight.
Oh, okay. We had another question. Oh, I'm doing it, guys. I yawned. I'm always yawning while podcasting. Gotta stop it. Okay. Somebody asked us about our last PG-13 episode.
Oh, yeah.
In which we shot the moon and said the unspoken truth. Oh, and that came up about the somebody asked about the origin of Bonnie and Buxom in bed, so I went and looked that up, and it is of course now I'm not going to remember. It changed. That phrase is where we get to love, honor, and obey. Was the Bonnie and Buxom in bed and board was changed to love, honor, and obey. But Bonnie would mean like good or good-natured kind of, and I think Buxom was obedient, and so the obey was
But Bonnie has a side to it that's like, we all know what we mean when we say that is a really Bonnie little baby. You know, like, we don't mean...
No, it's actually, I saw
somewhere...
somewhere it was described as having good air.
Okay.
Like, having an ambiance of pleasantness.
It's cheerful,
like,
and fun and cute.
Bonnie. Like a Bonnie little wife. Would not be the one who is...
uptight prude.
No, it's not going to be her. And then Buxom was not specifically...
barmaid-esque.
Not speaking of your physical appearance, but it did mean obedient, which is actually really interesting to me, because I think there's probably some really interesting word origins there, that
linguistic relationships.
Because the thing that's interesting is that now if you said someone was buxom, you're really just talking about anatomical truths at that point. But the thing that I think is interesting is that it did say, it doesn't, the fact that it was not meaning your actual body shape does not matter at all. The fact that you were promising to be good and obedient in bed and bored is not subtle. Now, this was changed, I think, by Cranmer, is the one who did love, honor, and obey. But the thing is like, this is... I'm pretty sure the way we ever heard of those vows was through a historic narrative of a Puritan's wedding. You know, like it was someone still using the older vows. So it was not like a specifically Puritan vow, but it was definitely still in that time period.
Sure.
That could have still been in circulation. So we did check. We fact checked. We never knew we were going to bring that up. So we didn't fact check in advance.
Come with a
we didn't come. We just pop off as we go. So that was that. And then somebody did ask about, even though we were laughing ourselves sick over
some of the things
that some of us might have called people. It's
may or may not
might have let something slip out there. And but this is the thing that it was sort of like, what about wives who are really like, this is really hard because they want to be a fun, cheerful, loving wife, but they just don't want to be. You know, like, they want to be, but they're struggling constantly against the flesh.
The sexual relationship is difficult.
And that they are constantly struggling against the flesh. Even, like, and I say the flesh because it was not a more complicated situation other than just yourself. You know, not like...
just not being
not
interested.
Not past damage, not all this other stuff. Just that this is hard for me and I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
But I want to be the kind of wife who doesn't struggle with this. Like, it's just that combination. And one of the things, there's just a few things that I thought we were mostly on the laughing side of this. And as Becca said, we're the real Becca and Rachel sex tip as episode is happening never. That's not the one that we're doing.
Don't hold your breath for that.
Don't hold your breath there. But the thing that some of the principles I think are really helpful to look at objectively. One of them, one of the things I'll take it out of the context of sex and into like a serious dating relationship, not like you've been dating for a long time, but if a guy is seriously interested in marriage and asks a girl out for coffee and they both know that this is serious, not joking. Do you know what I mean? Like, this is not just like, they both know that we're pursuing marriage, right? We know, because this is common in our community, that our people are not dating until they are serious about marriage. So, in our church community. And so sometimes what happens is a guy asks a girl to go get a coffee. And she's like, but if he wants to move to Minnesota, I'm not sure I can go. You know, like, and you're like, wait a minute. But can you go to coffee with him? Like, nobody's asking you to move across the world yet.
Yeah.
We just need to,
and
like,
he might not ask you to move across the world.
Turns out he isn't proposing today. Turns out he wants to go out to coffee. So the fact that the stakes are high, in the sense that they're not high, but the fact that the serious conversation is on the table, can make you race ahead 50 steps.
Yeah.
And the reason and then worry about something that you don't have the grace for, because why would you have the grace for that right now? Because the Lord is not going to give you the grace for being this man's wife with 3 children away from your family, when you are really just needing the grace to go out on a date with them. So, like, how, you know, like, you're looking for something. And I think that this principle applies in marriage, because any kind of affection from your husband, a wife can read it as, I'm not in the mood right now. And it's like, what? You're not in the mood?
I really wondered where you were going with that.
I'm glad I've looped you in now. But I'm saying your husband can just be being affectionate to you, and you're rejecting that as I know what you're thinking, you know, like, I don't want to move to Minnesota. You know, like, I'm not, and it's this immediate, like, I reject that. But the question is not, he's not, you know, it's
basically,
like, this is an unfolding,
the drawbridge up and the portcullis down,
and throwing hot oil from above, because you're thinking, this is going nowhere I want to go. But the reality is that the question is, can you follow him with what he's actually asking of you right now? Which is, and if, like, looking at you affectionately, could you just maybe cope with that? You know, like, could you just maybe, you know, like, in that whole relationship, instead of being, like, jumping way ahead in the story to say, I'm not in the mood, why don't you just see if you can be responsive to what actually is happening in this moment, and be friendly here and not worry about it? You know, like, not be constantly worrying about the future.
I mean, I don't want to get overly tangled here, but the truth is, with your analogy, where it falls apart is that if you're married, then he probably is asking you to move to Minnesota.
Yeah, but the reality is still that I love that we have a code. You know, scare quotes, moving to Minnesota.
It's not like you're being, like, crazy town to think that that's what's happening.
No, and actually, I think if you don't have a problem being a responsive and pleasant wife, then that's not really something that you need to probably work on. But
I'm just saying, you might not need the grace for it right now, but you might need the grace for it in 21 minutes. So,
I'm just saying, break this down into smaller steps, which is, can I be loving and responsive in this moment, rather than, oh my goodness, I'm not ready to, like
just as long as you realize that then you're going to have to be sweet about it in 1 minute from now.
Yeah, but I think what I'm trying to say is, do the obedience of right now, instead of worrying that you don't have the obedience for 10 minutes from now.
Sure.
Like,
that's fine.
Just,
as long as you're willing to acknowledge that
it's all moving to Minnesota. You've signed on the dotted line, you're moving to Minnesota. Every marriage is moving to Minnesota.
Or you better be.
Or if you're not obeying. But this is quite the code that we've worked.
It's elaborate. It's elaborate.
Okay, this is another story that tickles me bad. So I bought one of my youngest children a Hannah Anderson sweatshirt that was so much the favorite. It was in the favorite color. It was the hoodie of dreams.
Okay.
And in this moment of rapturous joy, the first day of wearing this hoodie, said child strolls through the living room with a big hole in the front of it, like a snippy hole, like the size of a nickel, probably. And I'm like, whoa, when did that happen? Like, what happened? And it was like, got a hole in it. I'm like, well, how did this happen? And as the plot points unfold, it seems that this child was so taken with their hoodie, like so fond, and felt like it was so nice and thick, that he checked if it was too thick to cut through with a pair of scissors.
Turns out it wasn't.
Oh, nope, that Hannah Anderson Eddie just gave right in to a pair of scissors. Snipped on the front. But the thing that at the time, I was like, I have no idea what this is a metaphor for, but it is a metaphor for something. Like, but
there's something deeply human about it.
Yeah, there is. There's like
I
this
love
weird
this thing so much I snipped a hole in the
Yeah,
front.
but I was actually thinking about that in the romantic relationship. That women do that all the time. With like, I love this man so much, and I love the idea of this marriage being a happy marriage, and I love the concept of us doing a good job, but I wonder if he really loves me so much that even if I snip it, it won't break. Like, even like testing.
It's like, I'm going to be ugly and rude.
Yeah, and if he cares for me, then I will come out of this with no holes in the front of my favorite hoodie. Turns out that this relationship can be sabotaged, and you can be doing things that are deeply wounding to your husband in what you think is just a test of his love for you.
Yeah.
You know, like where you're
just
like,
check
well,
it.
if you really loved me, I
like-
could be the ugliest thing ever, and
Yeah.
you would not flinch.
It's kind of, I'm going to start dropping this off higher and higher balconies just to see
Just
if
to
it
check,
survives.
because I bet, but like thinking that that's actually the right way to test the strength of the garment.
It is very much a sort of tendency of the flesh, is to do that. And
to
you're
try
right.
it in a completely unnatural way, to test it, like,
It's like, well, it's snipped through on the front, but what if I snip it on the sleeve?
and then being like, well, that's lame. Like, man, this sweatshirt is nothing good after all.
I know.
Like, because I went at it with a pair of scissors and it got a hole. And you want to judge your husband like he's supposed to be some kind of a incredible.
I just like that we're basically taking metaphors to the level of wear a sweatshirt to Minnesota, but don't cut holes
Do
in it.
not cut holes in your sweatshirt on your way to Minnesota. Because we all know you're going there.
One step at a time. You're going
One-
to need to be sweet all the way.
Right. Well, what I'm saying is that's a very specifically feminine relationship challenging technique. Is to be like, well, what if I say something wildly mean and demeaning and disrespectful?
Yeah.
Will he still turn around and say, "You're so beautiful"?
When
Like,
you're angry.
and then you're like, I just can't believe that he couldn't tell me I'm beautiful at such a time as that when I was cutting
I
holes
do
in
think
the
that
sweatshirt.
if there was a class for men, they could put together a lot of flashcards of when your wife gives you a fat face and says something rude, here's what she means. Instead of what she said, she means something very different than that.
She's looking for affection.
Yeah.
But that's what I've said this before on the podcast, and I think it's just nice wifing. It's something that I try to do. I'm not saying I excel at this. But when I know what I need, I try to just say it. Instead of trying to
dropping
get
clues.
it. Well, instead of trying to get it through other methods. Like, and it makes you feel like, man, are you ever cutting some of the drama out? But yeah, you know what? Everyone in the world appreciates someone just saying, you know what? I think I'm just feeling needy and tired. And I need you to tell me that you like the work I'm doing, because that would help me today.
No, you're right. Because
Instead of saying, you never say anything nice about what I'm doing, or, you know, like, because then it turns into a completely different discussion. Like, you're trying to get the person to say the thing.
But you're fishing for compliments. The fishing for compliments by means of dropping random bait in the water.
But then what you pull up is sometimes a big chunk of algae because you were fishing for something, who knows what. You know, and what you get back is, well, maybe your laundry system isn't that great.
But see, here's the trick, is that women instinctively know what to say in these instances. So if your friend says, "Oh, I'm just feeling so fat," then you say to her,
"What? Are you
look
crazy?
What's happening?" And if you say to your husband, "Oh, I'm just feeling so fat,"
he's like,
and
well,
he
you
says,
should exercise
and
more
if he
and eat less.
says, well, what if you join Weight Watchers and you're like, "Have you no heart?
What is wrong with you? Don't you even know? Ah! Like, ow! I can't believe you said I was fat." Which he didn't say.
No.
He said maybe you should diet and exercise.
Because you said, one of my big problems is I'm feeling fat.
The thing that most afflicts me today is my fatness.
And then what
and he's
happened?
like, well, what happened to that old plan you had?
The thing that he did wrong was he believed what you said with your words. And you're like, and this is where you're like, I can't believe.
Heartless man.
I know. And so that's why I think that if the men were getting together, we could put together a deck of flashcards. Mm-hmm. When your wife says she's fat, she means, could you please tell me I'm pretty?
How about you give me a hug and say that you like me? That would do it. That would be the ticket. But I've said this before too. I think that the real temptation is that we like to dabble in drama. And so sometimes women just want to be the star of their own show.
And they want to have it not just dabble in drama.
They want to wallow.
Like, splash about.
They want to be a water buffalo of drama in Minnesota.
No, they want to be a water buffalo anywhere but Minnesota.
The water buffalo who refuses to proceed to Minnesota. All you Minnesota,
snipping your sweatshirt the whole way.
All of you Minnesota listeners are really feeling like you've made it to the top now. Sorry about it, guys. But the point is just that sometimes the idea behind throwing a tantrum like that, where you just wall up and refuse to be comforted, is the idea there is wanting to test everyone else's affection for you. Yes. Because then your husband is like, well, if you're gonna be like that, I'm gonna go do something else. And it's like, how could he? How could he walk away from me?
When he knows that I'm hurting.
When he knows that I'm sitting here making ugly faces at him. How could he walk away from this precious show? Because this is surely the best thing going. I can't imagine anyone wanting to look at ESPN when there's such an option as this. And then you go tell your friends, and they're like, if he loved you, he would know better than that. And you're like, I don't know. I think if you were being a good person, if you were loving him, this wouldn't have come to such a pass as this. Wouldn't have had to have such a level 12 crisis.
Goodness sakes.
All right.
Oh, and sometimes if you just go to Minnesota, it will avert some of the problems.
That's so true, though, because the reality is, stop worrying about how you feel in the moment and just say, like, what's my duty right now? And don't do the thing like, I mean, don't do the like where you just calculate, like, I don't have enough in my reserves to get me through, you know, like where you're like, I couldn't possibly deal with this. Well, you know what takes a lot of energy is living in an unhappy marriage.
Oh,
like,
my word,
and like, if you're concerned that you don't have the time or energy to physically love your husband, then just consider whether it's worth the time and energy it's going to take as a couple needing to go get counsel and dealing with this and having all these issues.
If there's times where you just feel like you've run out, you know, like there's no more oil in the jar, it's like, pray that God would what was it, Elijah, the widow with the oil that didn't run out? just pray
Was it
God
Elijah,
will do
not
that.
Elisha? I think it was Elijah.
I think it was Elijah. I think it was
Yeah,
Elijah.
he was.
And it was
Just be
pray
a
that
friend.
God will just and honestly, if you're trying to be obedient and that's what you're asking for, it's a prayer God always answers.
Isn't that the
He
truth?
really does.
And I want to just say here,
it's one of the times where you can know you're praying in the will of God.
isn't that the truth? And the thing is another thing that used to be in wedding vows, which is funny, that we somehow dropped it like it was gauche to talk about such things at the wedding vow, which is kind of the whole point of the marriage, is that it was a provision against the flesh. Like, that marriage is a provision against the flesh. And the amazing thing is, yes, it's a provision against the man's lusts and fleshly desires that he has a wife. But it is also a provision against yours, that you have to keep not, being the goddess of your own narrative. That you have to give yourself, like that is a provision against your flesh too. It's not like you're just there so your husband won't be as tempted. He is also there so that you will be kept in. This is a mutual thing, and that it is good for you and it's good for him, and it's not something that it is holy and undefiled.
And if this is the thing that you are sticking on in your life, or if it's one of the things you're sticking on, that it's basically like, I don't want to be sacrilegious here or blasphemous, but
try
it's
not
like
to be.
God is I can't say God is your personal trainer, but if you think of it that way, it's like, here is the exercise I need you to get good at. We are going to focus in on something, and you're going to learn how to do this well, and it's because I have another end in mind for you. And so just decide that if this is the exercise that is in front of you, that you're going to actually attempt to become good at it.
You're going to embark on the journey.
You're going to give it a shot.
And one of the things that you have to acknowledge at the outset is that you should say, if I'm married, this is going to be a part of my life.
Yeah.
And why don't we just decide now to have it be a non-dramatic part of my life? To have it